Those pea seeds in your hand are not waiting for cooler air. They are waiting on the soil, not the sky. I learned that after planting right on schedule, watering carefully, and watching my row come up thin while several seeds never showed. A cool August morning can fool you because the ground is still holding summer heat. Before another seed goes in, there is one temperature you need to check first. 3 years ago, I marked my calendar for fall peas the way every seed packet told me to. Counted the days back from first frost, and put seed in the ground right on schedule. I watered that row every morning before coffee, same as I always do. Nothing fancy, just consistent. 2 weeks in, half the row was still bare dirt. The seedlings that did come up looked thin and pale, like they were saving energy instead of spending it. I stood at the end of that row more than once, coffee going cold in my hand, wondering what I had done wrong. I figured I had gotten a bad batch of seed, so I marked the packet and made a note to switch brands next year, feeling a little embarrassed about the whole thing. Every seed rack in town tells you the same thing. And so does every old-timer down at the co-op who's never once stuck a thermometer in the ground either. The truth is, I never once questioned the calendar. Everybody told me the same thing. Count back from first frost, get your peas in by the second week of August, and you are covered. That is the number every seed rack and every gardening column repeats. Nobody stops to ask what is actually happening an inch or two under your boots the moment you drop that seed into the ground. I trusted the calendar because it felt like the one thing in gardening that was not up for debate. Here is what I did not know yet. Germination on a dry pea planted straight from the packet usually runs somewhere between 6 and 17 days. Mine took every bit of that window, and a good number of seeds never showed up at all. I chalked it up to bad luck, maybe old seed, maybe a squirrel or two. What I should have been asking is why the ones that did sprout took so long to do it, in weather that felt, by every account, perfectly reasonable for planting. That is the piece the calendar leaves out completely. It tells you when to plant. It says nothing about what the ground is actually doing while you wait. And it never once occurred to me that the two could be different things. I did not think to question the ground until someone finally showed me I had been asking the wrong question the whole time. And that's exactly why the calendar kept failing me, no matter how carefully I followed it. Here's the part that changes everything. Your peas were never listening to the thermometer on your porch. They're listening to the soil. At the exact depth where you drop the seed, usually an inch to an inch and a half down. And soil does not cool off the way air does. Air can drop 10 degrees in a single evening, and you feel it the second you step outside for coffee. Soil holds on to summer's heat for weeks after that, the same way a heavy blanket keeps holding your body heat long after you have climbed out of bed and gone to make breakfast. The seed is sitting inside that blanket the whole time. It has no idea the porch thermometer read 72 this morning, or that you finally needed a light jacket walking out to check the mail. Here is the number, and it is not what most people expect. Get your soil steady somewhere in the 60s to mid-70s, and germination is fast and even, the best window your pea seed gets all year. Drop below 40 and everything slows to a crawl. Most gardeners already half know that from spring planting. Push the other way, into the steady 80s, and you get the same slowdown in reverse. Fewer seeds break the surface. The ones that do take their time about it. Same punishment. If your plant comes up anyway, it does not get off easy later either. Heat can hurt your crop twice. Thin germination now, and it stops flowering and setting pods in that same range later on. I found this out for certain the afternoon I finally sat down and read through the University of Maryland Extension's guide on growing peas. Fall peas underperform mostly because the seed does not germinate readily in warm soil, not because the air outside has not cooled off enough yet. 3 years of guessing rearranged itself in my head right there at the kitchen table. An old gardener I know, he has worked the same half acre for close to 30 years, showed me what he actually does every late summer before a single seed goes in. He does not check the sky at all. He walks out to the bed, pushes a soil thermometer down to where the seed will sit, and reads the number. That is it. No weather app first, no calendar math first, just the ground telling him the truth before he trusts it with anything. He is the one who steered me toward Wando, a shelling pea bred back in 1943 specifically to shrug off heat while still holding up in the cold, 60 to 72 days to harvest depending on your fall. It is not magic and it will not save you from soil sitting in the high 80s. It just buys you a little more room while you are still learning to read the ground for yourself, instead of trusting a date circled on a calendar in June. Once you know the calendar is the one that has been lying to you, the question stops being, when do I plant, and starts being, how do I actually check? Once you know that, the fix isn't complicated. It's just 3 things done in the right order. So here's exactly what I do differently now in the order I do it. First thing, before anything else touches the ground, I push a soil thermometer down to seed depth, right where that pea is going to sit, about 1 inch to 1.5 inches deep. Not the surface. Surface soil heats and cools fast. It will tell you a story the seed underneath isn't living. Early morning is best, before the sun has had a chance to warm that top layer and throw the number off. I want a real read, not a hopeful one. You are measuring where the seed actually sits, not where the sun happens to hit. Takes about 30 seconds, and it is the one habit that changes everything else, because every decision after it depends on that single number. Second, I soak the seed. 8 to 24 hours in water, right on the counter, before it ever goes in the ground. This isn't superstition. Once the soil actually sits in that sweet range we talked about, a soaked seed wakes up faster than a dry one, and every day you shave off matters when you're racing a hard frost. I usually start the soak the same evening I get a good thermometer reading, drop the seed in an old jar, and forget about it until morning. No special water, no additives, just time and moisture doing what a dry seed can't do on its own. Third, I pick the right variety and do the math on timing instead of guessing at it. Wando, the one I mentioned already, still does the heavy lifting for me most years, 60 to 72 days depending on the fall. But if you're gardening in Zone 5 or colder, Alaska and Little Marvel are worth knowing too, both quick to mature, usually somewhere around 55 to 65 days depending on the packet, and both bred to shrug off a chill, which buys you room if your fall window runs short. For the math, take the days to maturity right off the seed packet, add roughly 10 days to cover the slower growth that comes with shorter fall daylight, then count backward from your first frost date. Say your variety lists 60 days. Add the 10, you're at 70. Count 70 days back from whatever your frost date usually lands on, and that's your planting day, not a month circled out of habit years ago. Gardeners further north tend to need to get seed in the ground earlier than gardeners further south simply because the frost shows up sooner where they live. I still remember the morning I actually did this for the first time. Coffee in one hand, thermometer in the other, kneeling at the edge of the bed I'd already failed in once. I watched the number settle, wrote it on a scrap of paper, and decided right there whether the seed was going in the water that night or waiting a few more days. No calendar in sight, just the reading, and what it told me to do next. 3 steps on paper, but really it came down to one morning and one number. A guy wrote to me a while back, said he'd planted fall peas 2 years running, and both times the germination came in thin. He wanted to know if soaking the seed overnight actually made a difference or if it was just one more chore nobody needed. I told him the soaking only pays off once the soil's already in range. Skip the thermometer and the soak won't save you, you'll just have a wet seed sitting in ground that's still too hot to wake it up. Do both in order and it will. Do those 3 things in order and most falls that's the whole fix. But not every August plays fair. If checking the soil instead of guessing from the calendar is the kind of detail you have been looking for, subscribe and hit the bell. Every video stays just as specific. So what do you do when the ground itself refuses to cool down on its own schedule? But some Augusts, the ground just won't cool off on its own schedule, no matter how patient you are. If you've been checking that thermometer for a week and it still won't drop out of the 80s, waiting longer isn't the answer. You go from checking the ground to actually changing it. Pull a length of shade cloth over the bed a few days before you plant. It doesn't look like much, just fabric stretched over a couple of stakes, but it blocks the sun from hammering that soil all afternoon. Bare dirt in full sun soaks up heat like your driveway in July and keeps radiating it back into the seed zone long after dark. Cut the sun off the surface, and the soil underneath simply has less heat to hold on to. A quick splash of cool water from your hose does something similar for maybe an hour. Then the sun heats it right back up. Shade keeps working the whole day, not just the moment you're standing there with the hose in your hand. Once the seedlings are up, an inch or two tall, switch to mulch. 2 to 4 inches, straw or shredded leaves, whatever you've got sitting around already, spread right around the base of the plants. That layer does for the growing plant what the shade cloth did for the seed. It keeps the soil underneath cooler, holds the moisture instead of letting it bake off by noon, and it means you're not out there with the hose every single evening trying to keep up. Set it once, and it keeps working while you go do something else with your Saturday. Between the two, most years that's enough to get seedlings through the roughest stretch of late summer heat without babysitting the bed every day. I have to be honest with you here because this channel doesn't do false promises. Shade cloth and mulch will buy you real degrees, but they won't turn a 100-degree August into a 60-degree one. If you're gardening deep in the south where the ground barely lets go of summer before October, or somewhere so far north that first frost shows up before a pea has a chance to mature, fall peas might just not be the right crop for that particular year. That's not a failure on your part, it's just the calendar and the climate refusing to line up, and a spring planting is still the safer bet in those spots. There's no shame in knowing which season actually works for where you live instead of forcing a fall crop that was never going to make it. And the same threshold we talked about before still holds true here too. Once the heat holds above the mid-80s for good, it stops flowering and setting pods, no matter how much shade cloth you've got draped over the bed. Cover the ground first, and it stops fighting you. Skip that, and it doesn't matter how carefully you counted the days. The calendar was never lying to you. It just was never built to answer the one question that actually decides everything under your boots. One more thing. If you don't have a soil thermometer yet, push your bare finger knuckle deep into that same spot for a few seconds. If it's uncomfortable to keep it there, the ground is still too hot for a pea seed, no matter what the weather app says about the air outside. So here's what to actually do next. Before your next round of peas goes in, push a soil thermometer into that exact spot first thing tomorrow morning. Read the number. Under 75, soak your seed that same afternoon. Still in the 80s, wait 3 more days and check again. The ground doesn't care what the calendar says, it only answers when you actually ask it.